At 2:12 a.m. local time, a thick fog shrouded the pine forests of Kursk Oblast, a vast region in western Russia spanning thousands of square miles, characterized by dense woodlands, strategic rail hubs, and hidden underground bunkers. Through this misty veil rolled a Russian military convoy, armored personnel carriers rumbling over uneven terrain, fuel trucks laden with supplies critical for sustained operations, and a radar jammer mounted on a robust six-wheeled Ural truck, designed to disrupt enemy communications and guidance systems. The air was still, the silence broken only by the low hum of engines and the occasional creak of metal. Then, a faint buzz pierced the quiet, not the thunderous roar of incoming missiles or the screech of fighter jets, but the subtle whir of propellers from a small, unassuming device descending from above. This was no high-tech missile worth millions, it was a first-person view, FPV, drone, assembled in a Ukrainian garage for roughly $400, diving toward its target like a precision-guided hornet on a kamikaze mission. As it approached, Russian anti-aircraft systems sprang to life, illuminating the sky with a grid of red tracers in a desperate attempt to intercept. But it was too late. The drone struck, its payload detonating in a flash that turned the night into day. Static-filled screens monitoring the convoy, followed by explosions rippling through the line one after another, shredding vehicles and scattering debris. In the span of 2 weeks, swarms of these invisible, low-cost attackers decimated what was once considered one of Russia's most fortified military districts. This wasn't mere disruption, it was a calculated dismantling, a demonstration of how asymmetric warfare, powered by ingenuity and technology, could challenge a conventional military powerhouse. How did these garage-built FPV rigs penetrate Russia's overlapping electronic warfare bubbles, evade advanced radar systems, and dismantle an entire command grid? The answer lies in a combination of innovative tactics, adaptive technology, and the vulnerabilities inherent in Russia's defensive posture. Spoiler alert: the central military district wasn't simply breached, it was systematically eroded from within, piece by piece. Over the next several thousand words, we'll delve into the mechanics of this operation, exploring how Ukraine's affordable drones bypassed jamming fields and radar arrays, outmaneuvered sophisticated air defense systems like the Panzer and S-300, and orchestrated swarms of suicidal strikes that shredded Russian logistics and command structures. This narrative isn't just a recounting of events, it's a blueprint for the evolution of next-generation warfare, where code and creativity prove deadlier than sheer firepower or expenditure. To understand the scale of this disruption, consider the statistics. In just 14 days, Ukrainian forces reported the destruction of over 1,800 Russian military assets, including 16 tanks, 21 armored personnel carriers, APCs, 75 artillery systems, 22 air defense platforms, 17 electronic warfare nodes, 577 transport vehicles, 80 enemy drones, 38 antenna arrays, 789 fortified positions, 15 ammunition depots, and 7 fuel storage centers. These weren't random hits, they were surgical strikes targeting the nervous system of Russian battlefield dominance. The 22 surface-to-air missile (SAM) systems destroyed weren't mere anti-aircraft tools, they formed regional shields protecting convoys and bases from aerial reconnaissance. The jammers acted as firewalls against NATO-supplied intelligence feeds, while the depots served as the pulsing heart of supply lines for mobile battalions. By severing these critical nodes, Ukraine didn't just inflict damage, it carved open corridors into Russia's internal defense grid, exposing vulnerabilities that had been assumed impregnable. Kursk Oblast, part of Russia's central military district, presented a formidable challenge on paper. Covering expansive terrain with natural barriers like forests and rivers, it was layered with electronic warfare systems from Voronezh to Bryansk, creating overlapping bubbles that jammed GPS signals, scrambled drone guidance, and spoofed feeds with decoys. Western smart weapons, reliant on satellite navigation, would likely falter here, as evidenced by past failures in similar environments. Moreover, international legality constrained NATO allies from direct strikes inside Russian territory. Yet Ukraine's approach was asymmetric by design, no reliance on billion-dollar cruise missiles or satellite constellations, but instead on FPV rigs piloted by operators with drone racing reflexes, high-gain antennas, and real-time video feeds. FPV drones, or first-person view unmanned aerial vehicles, represent a doctrine shift in Ukrainian warfare. Unlike standardized models, Ukraine's fleet is a mosaic of custom builds, often starting with commercial racer frames modified in makeshift workshops. These drones typically feature lightweight carbon fiber chassis for agility, lithium polymer batteries for burst acceleration, and payloads ranging from grenades to shaped charges capable of piercing armor. The innovation lies in their mesh targeting system. Soldiers on the ground use Starlink uplinks to compile distributed maps of enemy positions, sharing data in real time. Each operator receives a fragment of this puzzle, allowing coordinated strikes. To evade radar, drones hug the terrain, flying nap of the Earth routes at altitudes under 30 feet too low for systems like the S-300 to lock on effectively, and too nimble for Panzer batteries to track. The real game changer, however, is their adaptability to jamming. When electronic warfare fields activate, FPV pilots switch from GPS to dead reckoning or optical line-of-sight navigation, relying on onboard cameras and inertial sensors. In essence, these are algorithmic wasps, suicidal, swarm-capable, and guided by human eyes through immersive goggles. Ukraine produces thousands monthly, scaling production through volunteer networks and government incentives. This proliferation has turned the tide in localized engagements, where cost asymmetry shines $400 per drone versus millions in Russian hardware losses. Consider a specific example from the Kursk operation, at dawn in the Belgorod sector, for Russian convoys loaded with Uragan multiple launch rocket system (MLRS) munitions hunkered under camouflage netting. At 5:12 a.m., 17 Ukrainian FPV drones launched from an abandoned farmhouse 14 kilometers away. Each carried a 3D printed shaped charge, engineered to penetrate up to 40 millimeters of armor. Flying at 12 feet altitude and 72 kilometers per hour, they skimmed tree lanes and whipped around hills, evading radio frequency detection. As Russian jammers activated, the drones seamlessly transitioned to manual control, diving toward targets. Payload struck a command APC, 2 ammo trucks, a relay antenna, and ignited fuel stores. Secondary explosions rippled through a nearby Grad battery, vaporizing 60 tons of ammunition in 8 seconds. This pattern repeated over 70 times in 14 days, with single drones wiping out high-value assets like T-72 tanks, 9 K-33 OSA Buk launchers, and R-330 electronic warfare trucks. These weren't static targets. Strikes hit moving convoys, reloading sites, and repositioning radars, bleeding Russia's active inventory. The math of warfare shifted. Ukraine spent less per kill than the cost of a tank tread, embodying a doctrine of drone-first assault and FPV saturation. Russia's response remained kinetic and sluggish, relying on artillery barrages and infantry pushes that failed to evolve against the swarm logic. Did you know that in those 14 days alone, the economic disparity was staggering? Each $400 drone inflicted losses averaging $4 million, a return on investment that militaries worldwide are now scrambling to replicate. This isn't recycled news footage, it's real-time disruption, captured in grainy FPV feeds and satellite imagery, reshaping how wars are fought. Militaries everywhere are panicking because the era of swarm warfare has arrived, where adaptation trumps expenditure. To grasp why this happened, rewind to the broader context of the Kursk incursion. On August 6, 2024, Ukrainian forces launched a surprise cross-border operation into Kursk Oblast, marking the largest incursion into Russian territory since World War II. Ukrainian troops, equipped with tanks, armored vehicles, and supported by artillery and drones, crossed into Russia, catching Moscow off guard. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported deploying air and artillery to counter the advance, but initial claims of repelling the attack were edited as fighting continued. By the end of the first week, Ukraine claimed control of over 1,000 square kilometers, including 28 settlements, forcing the evacuation of tens of thousands of civilians. The operation's goals, as stated by Ukrainian officials, included diverting Russian forces from eastern Ukraine, capturing prisoners for exchanges, and creating a buffer zone to protect against Russian artillery. However, neutral analyses suggest mixed results. The Institute for the Study of War, ISW, noted that while Russia redeployed forces to Kursk, it did not pull from high-priority areas like Donetsk Oblast, allowing advances toward Pokrovsk to continue. Critics argued the incursion stretched Ukrainian resources, contributing to losses in the east. Drones played a pivotal role from the outset. Ukrainian FPV drones blinded Russian reconnaissance, jammed communications, and struck key assets. Videos from ex-posts show FPV strikes on Russian helicopters, including Mi-8 and Mi-28 models, mid-flight, a feat previously thought improbable for low-cost drones. One clip depicts a $400 FPV hitting in Mi-28's tail rotor, potentially downing the multi-million-dollar aircraft. These attacks highlighted FPV effectiveness: agile, cheap, and deadly against high-value targets. Russian responses included downing Ukrainian drones, but losses mounted. Moscow claimed intercepting hundreds of drones over Kursk, yet Ukrainian strikes persisted, targeting convoys and depots. Neutral sources like ISW confirmed Ukrainian advances, aided by drone swarms disrupting Russian logistics. Expanding on FPV technology, these drones use video feeds for pilot immersion, allowing precise maneuvers. Ukraine's innovation includes mesh networks for targeting and low-altitude flights to evade radar. Fiber optic variants, resistant to jamming, emerged later, but early Kursk operations relied on standard FPVs with optical guidance. Russian countermeasures evolved by mid-2024. Fiber optic drones countered Ukrainian jamming, eroding Kyiv's edge. In Kursk, Russia deployed these for deep strikes, crippling Ukrainian supply lines. X videos show Russian FPVs destroying Ukrainian armor, like BTRs and tanks. Losses were heavy on both sides. Ukraine claimed 80,000 Russian casualties in Kursk, with 2,432 equipment pieces destroyed. Russia countered with 74,000 Ukrainian casualties and 2,915 equipment losses. OSINT estimates roughly 790 Ukrainian and 740 Russian equipment losses. Drones accounted for many, with FPVs responsible for 20 to 40% effectiveness in strikes. The incursion's impact on warfare is profound. Swarms demonstrated how low-cost tech can challenge superior numbers. However, Russia's counteroffensive, bolstered by North Korean troops and fiber optics, reclaimed most territory by March 2025. Analysts like those from ISW view it as a strategic failure for Ukraine, diverting resources without decisive gains. Yet, the operation showcased adaptation's supremacy. If $400 drones can dismantle empires, future wars will prioritize intelligence over firepower. As one viewer might ask, if this is what 400 can do, imagine 10,000? The answer lies in strategy, precision, and relentless evolution.